So thanks again. My name is Bosiljka Glumac, and I'm a professor of geosciences at Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts. I will get us started today, and then I'm going to turn it over to my students and collaborators, Caroline and Julia. Thank you, Caroline, for putting the web address for our site in the chat. Thank you so much. We also have email for the project. So maybe, oh, it's also already in the chat. So I need to be multitasking a little bit more efficiently. Can keep up with my students. They're always way ahead of me. So thanks again for inviting us to present to the CLEAN group today. I know that some of you are already familiar with our work, and I know some of you were even on the CUNY conference call last Friday, so you have heard it before. And I'm sorry that we don't have more updates for you. We are a rather small group, and unlike some of you, as we already heard just now, we don't have any funding for this project. We also have full-time jobs, and this project has been a passion and a hobby for us. But even though we feel that we're constantly working on it, our progress has been rather slow. But nevertheless, today we'll progress our progress report on developing this open web-based educational resource that right now we call Climate in Arts and History, aimed at promoting climate literacy across disciplines. Some of you may remember it under different names. We have changed the name of the project several times from its original version to mostly reflect the feedback that we've gotten from various groups. So we have the link in the chat in case you want to explore on your own or follow along as we go. As I already mentioned, this work is far from being completed. In fact, we feel that it will always be work in progress as we continue to add and update information. Throughout this process, we need your feedback, and this is the reason why we're presenting today, to make you aware of our efforts if you're not already, and to invite your comments and suggestions. Please put your questions, requests, any other thoughts in the chat at any time. You can also email us at any time at climate@smith.edu. So thank you in advance for all of your feedback. So far in the course of this project, we have been compiling, researching, formatting, and posting information on climate-related topics in the subject areas of art, social studies, history, languages, literature, and music, as well as communicating with climate science and education experts to improve our content. And again, some of you have been contacted by us before, so you know what this is about. So this resource focusing on connecting these various aspects of human society and culture to specific climate events and explaining the science behind them to encourage climate education in classes outside of STEM disciplines. Although we anticipate that this resource is of potential interest in higher education and to the general public, our original intention was to gear it towards K-12 teachers. And consequently, our future work will also include more closely aligning the content with educational standards and developing activities for incorporating climate-related information into courses beyond natural and environmental sciences. So we're thinking and working about all of the above. So this is our home page for the site. We have an explanation of the site, as well as some information about who will find it useful and how to navigate it. In this presentation, we will take you through the rest quickly through the rest of the site and talk a little bit about each element. So we are going to start with art, and I'm going to turn it over to Caroline. Caroline, please go ahead and first introduce yourself and then tell us about what's going on here. Thank you.
My name is Caroline Davik, and I am a sophomore biology major at Smith. So this is our art table of contents, which we currently have organized into 3 sections. We have specific works of art that were inspired by climate events, climate-related themes that appear in many works of art across time, cultures, and mediums, and a selected list of resources that our users can check out on their own or that may provide us with potential entry ideas in the future. The links at the top of the page are to entries that have already been developed, and then the entries that are still text are still in development. So now we're going to go through one of our entries, Winter Landscape Paintings by Dutch and English Masters, to provide an example for our basic entry framework. So right now, all of the entries on our website follow a similar format. First, the historical event or the work of art or literature is described. And for the art and literature entries, we also provide information about where and when the work was created and how this might have inspired the work itself. Then the connection to climate and the science behind the climate event are explained. Some entries have a section for further exploration, which just provides some additional context or similar occurrences or further consequences of the climate event. And then all of the entries have a section for our references and additional resources. And as we add more entries to the website, we expect that this format might change slightly or vary, especially between subject areas, as we try to figure out how best to present information in each subject area. So in this entry, we explain that paintings by Dutch and English masters during the Little Ice Age show people skating on canals, lakes, and rivers that froze during the 14th through 19th century, but don't freeze today. And Winter Landscape with skaters and bird traps shown here is an example of one such painting. And in connecting this to climate, we explain that the freezing of canals, lakes, and rivers was due to an average drop in average global temperatures associated with the Little Ice Age.
Thank you, Caroline. Let me just go back over here and just to let you know that this is not what the final, at least what we envision the final art page is going to look like. We have many ideas, but none of them have been fully developed and finalized yet. For your information, we included we decided to include some resources to just give you more ideas about our thinking and directions so far. So just to give you a little bit more direction. And unlike the next subject area, for which we have many more examples and is further along, and it's history and social studies. So let me click on that. Before I turn it over to Julia, let me just for a second draw your attention to this illustration that shows temperature variations over the last 11,000 years or so, and some corresponding events in human history. This is from a chapter section called Climate in Human History in the textbook Evolution of the Earth by Prothero and Dot that I used in my extraordinary events in the history of Earth, life, and climate course at Smith College. And I was presenting this information to my students a couple of years ago, and kind of quizzing them or texting them or testing them how how familiar were they with relationships between climate events and certain events in human history, of realizing that they really did not know much about it. And this is what served as inspiration for this project. So, and here we are. Julia, please go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about what's going on in this section of the project.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Julia. I'm a senior at Smith College and a sociology major and a geosciences minor. And I've been working on this project for about the last 2 years. And we are just going to take you right now through the history and social studies table of contents. So as you can see, this is by far our most developed table of contents so far. And it's organized chronologically and geographically. And we really tried to kind of gear some of our topic choices towards topics that we have been finding are most often taught in K through 12 classes. But as Bosiljka mentioned, one of our goals in the future is to kind of more directly align our content with state teaching standards to make it even easier for educators to incorporate our content into their teaching. And so like our other table of contents, the entries here with hyperlinks are already live, and then the text ones are still in development and kind of forthcoming. So we're also going to go through an example now in the history and social studies table of contents. So we're going to go through our entry on Nile River flood failure in Tomic, Egypt. So this also follows a pretty similar framework from the last entry we saw. We have our what happened section. So here we're just kind of giving a little bit of background on Ptolemaic Egypt and its collapse. And we also try to incorporate kind of images whenever they're kind of relevant or could add. And then we have our how is this related to climate section. And this one got a little bit complex, but basically we're talking about how volcanic eruptions disrupted monsoon cycles, and this led to the Nile River not following its seasonal summer flood, and that in turn led to mass drought and increased tension in the already strained empire. So we have a little bit of detail there and a little graph. And then here our further exploration section, which often kind of varies in length and content. We are kind of talking a little bit about the relevance of Ptolemaic Egypt to the modern day and the monsoon-dependent agricultural systems of the present. And then finally, of course, we have our references and additional resources section. So Bosiljka, if you wouldn't mind, scrolling down a little bit. So we do try and kind of keep this as a bit of a mix of journal articles and more kind of academic peer-reviewed sources, and then also more accessible articles and websites that are, of course, still trustworthy, but maybe a little bit easier to digest for someone just trying to quickly get a better handle on what we're talking about. And this entry was heavily based on the research of Joe Manning, who's professor of classics and history at Yale. And so part of the work on this entry involved kind of reaching out to him and getting his feedback on our accuracy and translating his work to be a little bit more understandable by a more general audience. So a portion of our kind of process in these entries is also reaching out to experts in the fields and kind of getting their feedback and thoughts. So yeah, this has been our kind of brief intro to this subject area, and I'm going to hand it back over to Caroline to go through the next one.
Great, thank you, Julia. This really was a great example of collaboration with experts who are developing content and who are really, really interested in us promoting it to the general public. So thank you. So next, we're going to go over to the languages section. Back to you, Caroline.
Thank you. So this is our languages table of contents, which is one of our most recently developed subject areas. And although we don't currently have any entries posted yet, we have made significant progress in thinking about and developing and planning how we want this part of our website to look in the past few months. So we plan to develop an introductory entry at the top of the page, kind of like in the history and social studies table of contents, giving some background on the word climate, explaining its usage through time, listing other words and expressions related to climate, and having climate translated into some other languages. We also hope to develop specific entries for individual languages that explore climate education, attitudes surrounding climate, and cultural connections to climate in the countries where the language is spoken, as well as provide some climate-related vocabulary and a climate-related translation practice in the given language. So some of the languages that we have started to develop for these entries include German, Italian, French, and Japanese. And again, we also have a selected list of resources for users to check out at the bottom of the page.
Thank you, Caroline. This is also another example where we're working with other students. We have several students volunteers, and we're taking advantage of their background. They're bilingual students who are either studying languages or familiar with different countries and cultures. So we're really excited about this. We're working on this very actively right now, but didn't quite get to finalizing some specific entries to share with you today. And I'm also trying to monitor the chat as we go, so there's so much going on. Thank you so much for all of your suggestions and comments. This is exactly why we are here. Okay, let's take a quick look at our literature section. Also still fairly short, but we do have a lot of ideas and a lot of resources. Julia.
Yeah, so we are hoping to kind of develop this section further in the next few months, but we have two primary sections. So one is focused more on specific works of literature that were somehow inspired by climatic shifts and climate changes, and then another for exploring kind of more broadly climate themes in literature. So we have an entry on so-called like cli-fi, so climate fiction, and then we have another in progress on eco-criticism in that field. But we're going to kind of focus on our entry here from specific works of literature. So we're going to talk about Frankenstein and the vampire. And again, there's kind of a familiar format here from our other entries, but it's a little bit adapted to kind of fit works of literature. So we kind of describe the work very briefly and what inspired it, or when and where it was written, those kinds of like relevant bits of information. And so this entry is talking a little bit about the kind of setting that these two works were created in. So it was a really wet, unpleasant year, the kind of year without a summer. And so we kind of discuss how that was related to the eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia, as well as a little bit the kind of tail end of the Little Ice Age. And then, of course, then we get to the year without a summer. And our further exploration section here is really brief, but talking a little bit about some of the consequences of this year outside of literature, and then our section for references and additional resources.
Great, and I do get a little bit distracted by reading the chat, so I apologize to my students for not following very closely. But yes, again, thank you for all of the suggestions. Some of these, of course, we're familiar with, but we're always collecting other suggestions for where we can get more information from and what can we link to. So thank you. And our final, for now, section is music, and we're going to go back to Caroline.
Yeah, so this is our music table of contents, which we are still just developing. Right now, we have it split up into 3 sections, like the art table of contents. So specific works of music inspired by climate events, climate-related themes in music, and then a list of selected resources. And none of these entries have been developed yet, but the links and at the top of the page show potential users where we would like to go with entries and how one might connect music to climate.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. And I also wanted to mention that we're also working with some dance and theater professors at Smith to develop a little bit more ideas about the performing arts as well. So there are many different directions in which we can go. And we're also planning some focus groups with local teachers to see what they may find useful, and how to work more with educators to align the content with educational standards, as we already mentioned a couple of times. Okay, so this is about it. I just wanted to thank you again and everybody else who has been involved with this project so far. As you see, it's not nearly finished yet. But we would like to thank all of the people who have already helped us. We have a lot of people listed here in our acknowledgements, and please remember, you can always reach to us at climate@smith.edu. So thank you very much. I can either stop sharing now, or if there are any other parts of the site that you would like us to look at all together, or again, you do have the address, and you can play with it on your own and send us feedback at any time. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so very much. This is a wonderful project.
Sharing for now.
Yep. So you clearly gave us a path. If there are people here who, and I'm looking at some of the people here, and I'm thinking there might be some follow-up that's going to be occurring. But that email is the best way. That the one you have there on climate at
climate@smith.edu. Easy to remember. We claimed it.
So that's wonderful. So let's open up the floor. I see Ingrid. Do you want to go first?
Sure. I had a question. I gave a talk recently on climate change, and one of the participants asked me a question that I couldn't answer, but I thought maybe you could. So this was a man who was really interested in maps, especially old historical maps. And he said that he had heard that you could see evidence of sea level rise in maps going back to the 1600s. And he was wondering if I knew any more about that, and I don't. But I was wondering if that's something that you found. Have you looked at historical maps and seen signs of sea level rise?
We have not, but I would love to learn more. Anybody else on the call can offer any insights into this? This is a fantastic idea. I'm writing it down. This is great. This is why we do this. Even though our product is far from being finalized, we just want as much feedback along the way. And I actually have a question for the call organizers. Will the chat be saved? Because I can't quite digest everything right now, but we definitely want to preserve all of those resources and information.
Patrick, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, it's a quick answer. Yes, and we'll post it with the recording on the website.
Great, fantastic. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. It's also part of why we asked for the introductions in the chat, just so that it's kind of part of the record and makes everything sticky and easy to track. So hopefully that'll help. Jen, I see your hand.
Thank you. That was great. What I think is interesting about this is that, for many of us, I think, at least my experience has been, people really see climate change like very like cut and dry, compartmentalized in the sciences. And so even I would say in you know, having conversations with others around like the importance of integrating across the humanities, like have you, and this is for the presenters as well as anyone on the call, found examples of the research that sort of supports the need for that or demonstrates yeah, I guess I'm just looking for that that research, that connection. So, for example, if one was to write a grant that would include climate change, that make the argument for climate change education in the humanities, like where might one find that research? So I can see Frank kind of laughing at me a little bit. But yeah, that's my question. Is I'm trying to find the justification. I know that it's important, and I fully believe in all of it, but it's hard to convince others that it needs to be looked at across all disciplines and not just in the sciences. Thank you.
Just to clarify, I was not laughing at you. I'm just pleased that you're asking that kind of a question, and it makes me happy. So that was not gig. That was just so we're clear. So
you were laughing with me.
No, it's not laughing. I'm just happy. Not laughing. Let's open up the answer.
Yeah, I don't know the answer. I would love to know the answer because, as I said, we don't have any funding for this work, and we could definitely use funding so that we could potentially, you know, hire people to help us out, or pay teachers to be part of focus groups, things like that.
So thank you. Before we go to the question, Jim, I'm going to ask Patrick. You were involved in that initiative that Marta Kern was leading, where we were looking at the community of practice in the space a few years back. Did any literature-based, review show up in that work? You might want to introduce yourself in your answer.
Sure. Hi, I'm Patrick.
Okay, come on, more than that.
I'm a PhD candidate at CU Boulder, focused on art and science partnerships to catalyze community action on environmental and social justice issues, and work in a lot of spaces of bringing climate communication into various fields and art forms. In that particular group with Marta, it's a bit of an ongoing project since it's an NSF grant. There have been some tangential publications, but nothing that I think would speak to this as much as is needed. I think the challenge is that when you bring partners together to think about cross collaboration, usually what's produced is individual efforts, and then folks go back to publishing in their main fields. So it's tough to really gather strength in those efforts when folks don't sit there for long. I think there are ways to approach this. Max Boykoff's book that I'll throw in here on creative climate communications has a ton of research, maybe has the most research listed that I'm familiar with on justifying creative and cross-curricular communication efforts. But it's tough to get at this topic directly because there's not a whole lot of work and research that's been produced in that space. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
Jim, you're next, and then Tamara, and then Jen,
Sure.
You might want to put your hand down if you, unless you have another question.
So first, a very quick comment and then a question, is I'm definitely looking at what you're doing from the point of view of K-12 schools, especially the Mid-Atlantic and in California. What we're always looking to do is further expand which classes and which teachers are involved in climate change, and often they want to, because what they're finding is students are interested in climate change, and so it's a great hook into their larger subjects. So certainly there's the question of how can this fit into what's being taught in history in the K-12 level. So thank you on that, and you're going to continue to be a place to go for help on that. Okay. The other is just a very fascinating subject and valuable of the cross connection of disciplines, of there has been a fair amount of work, a good amount of work of understanding different cultures and societies over in history that have gone extinct or very much greatly affected in the Americas and Europe, all over, and that's in archaeology, anthropology, from the sciences and things, to be able to tie that into when we're looking at those cultures that we knew were hit, and then see, is there evidence of their artwork, of what they had. And that it's so great to pull those together, but then they also help each other, because when you see people's art, it's like you're getting to see them back alive. You're getting to read the author. You're getting to see the emotion. You're seeing, wow, look at that. Actually was about climate change, that they were doing. So that's definitely an angle to be, to looking at. If, okay, we know this culture was affected. Now, what do we have of their artwork? So thank you so much for what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anything, Julia and Caroline, that you would like to add?
No, I don't think so. Thank you for the suggestion.
Okay, great.
Yeah, no, just that I'm going through the chat and looking into everything, and it's definitely giving us a lot of really interesting pathways for going forward. So I definitely appreciate it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's keep going. Tamara, you're next.
Okay, so I just wanted to let you know, just for Bosiljka, those at Smith who don't know me, I'm teaching a global climate change class at Bentley University, which is a business school. So I'm making it's a science class, but it's making it relevant to business students. And I got connected to some faculty in the UK at Nottingham University. And we recently just did the page proofs for a paper on integrating climate change information across the disciplines in higher ed. So literature and arts classes. And so, like I said, we just sent the page proofs in for this paper, but I'm willing to share that with you once I'm allowed to share it with you.
That would be great. Thank you. We have, of course, looked at some information related to higher education, but also purposely decided to focus more on maybe not quite K, but middle school, high school levels.
Well, this
definitely
one some
to
ideas. I mean, basically,
yes.
what they've done is, so this is actually from a book, a set of this is a chapter in a book on climate change adaptation and mitigation, and this is a chapter on higher ed. And at this university, they've really worked at integrating it across all the disciplines, putting climate change in all of the disciplines.
Great. Yes, definitely. We definitely want to take a look. Thank you for doing it. Thank you, Tamara.
Wonderful. Thank you. Eric, you're up next.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really made me start to think about I put it in the chat briefly, the idea of past, present, and future context for climate. And just one of the things that popped to mind was common misconceptions or misinformation, if you want to think of it in a couple ways people deal with this or strategically use it. But the idea that climate has always changed, right, in the past. And so we expect it to change in the future, but sort of looking at, yes, it has changed, but mostly due to natural causes in the past. The big thing with the future is that the major influence is humans. So really drawing those distinctions, using it as an opportunity to address some common misconceptions or just where the understanding is not there or being misused. And there's a lot of those climate denier points and the evolution of the way we've kind of tried to make climate change not seem like it's important or real. So just somehow, I don't know, I don't have an answer, but I'm just kind of posing that as an opportunity.
Yes, thank you so much. And I actually did want to mention something in response to that. And that's something that we heard as a feedback before, is that a potential danger or a misuse of the information that we are presenting. If we present everything as, oh, see, the natural causes of climate change, the climate change has always been changing as a result of natural causes, and humans did just fine, that can be used in a kind of specific way, as you can imagine. So if others have some good ideas for how to address that a little bit better, because at first we were thinking about just about the past, and now we're really aware we definitely need to include the present and the future for that very reason, so that we can present a more balanced picture, a more complete picture. Thank you, Eric, for those comments.
I'll put the link to this, but there's an excellent resource called Skeptical Science. And they've looked at all these misconceptions and how they're used and misused appropriately, and how they did come from people's misconceptions, but people operationalize them for misinformation on purpose. So they've done wonderful work here. But I'll put that in here because it's interesting how, because that is a very common misconception. It's always changed, so thereby it's always going to change, and we have no causality. So, oh well, and the dinosaur, there's a comet. Yes, that's what's coming, and that's missing the point completely. But Nancy, you're up next. We're going to try and keep going here.
Yeah, just building on some of the other comments about interdisciplinarity, and just noting that cross-discipline articles and others tend to be at the low end as far as getting rewarded within any particular discipline. And so much of this work, as Frank is trying to deal with through ACE, goes underfunded, unfunded, is moonlighting this entire complex. So I guess I want to tie this back into ACE, Frank, and the extent to which recognition, rewards, really elevating the importance of this work professionally, and the funding and recognition that go with it, and the articulation of standards for interdisciplinary work, because it can be much. Anyhow, that was the comment that I wanted to make, and I'm really, really enjoying what you're doing. And I guess the corollary of what I just said goes back to the K through 12 curriculum, the ways in which it can become more integrated and holistic, which the learners definitely need. The logistics of doing that in our current structure are hard, but again, if there's funding to support the structuring and the curriculum development, the rest will follow. No, first the ideas that you guys are doing have to be there, then funding, then the rest will follow.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Janie?
Hi, thank you for the work that you're doing. I spend a lot of time myself thinking about how to integrate climate change into all disciplines, K to 12. My question is, because I think about this a lot, is you'd mentioned that you're kind of considering how to revise your format of your site. When I look at your site, it looks pretty accessible for like kind of high school kids or like kind of post-secondary. Have you already thought about how to kind of steer kids, like a second grader versus a middle schooler versus a high school kid? Have you already thought about that? And you probably can't answer it now, but I would also love to kind of, if you're interested, to collaborate with thinking together about how we might make those resources more accessible to younger kids as well.
Personally, I'm very interested in that, and we are bringing an education specialist from Smith who works with our local K through 6 school, and she has connections with teachers there. So we're really excited to welcome Carol Bernard to our team, and we're going to be starting to work with her this summer on that very, very topic, because I'm very interested in that as well. We mostly so far worked with middle and high school teachers, but I realized the need for younger children to be involved as well. Thank you. Definitely should stay in touch.
Wonderful. Are there any other questions? I don't see any hands up, but that doesn't mean there aren't questions. All right. So I as a former art major myself, There is a depth of the modern work that looks at the forward part of the climate continuum that Eric was talking about. And I'm just wondering, there's so much rich work. And I can't believe that there's not literature about the affective function in our understanding that isn't already well documented in the literature. If this group can't find access to that literature, either it doesn't exist, or that's the only conclusion I can come up with. So, but I've heard so many people talk about if you're trying to use logic to solve climate change, no good movement comes from logic. That's not where it withdraws its energy from. So this is one of the reasons why the interdisciplinary is such a critical part of the work. And so, when we started back in 2006, science teachers, it was like, oh, yep, science teachers. And since then, we have moved well, for good reason beyond that. So I don't know, Eric, that seems to have triggered something for you. So maybe that was the point.
Yeah, no, I was thinking along those lines, like the power of something like CliFi is it's the integration of language, of visual arts into this piece, like The Martian. It was beautiful science fiction because it used real science, and the visuals that Ridley Scott created were incredible about the Martian surface, and the storytelling was awesome. So it's like, it was just this merged all of these disciplines in this culminating thing. So I think really good CliFi is based in really good science and future projections and personal concerns and societal concerns. So there's this, not only this opportunity to look at all the way you've sort of, differentiated languages versus culture versus history, but the integration of those into the future and how that can really inform, viscerally, like, this is really important, I need to address it. And then where I'm hoping that things are going, we've had a lot of conversations in Clean around this, is not the dismal future things, but the opportunities for really awesome futures, but we need to engage in building those now. So CliFi that depicts, in 2040, we've turned the corner and we've hit all the project drawdown targets, and wow, we're moving forward in a great space. And the truth is, things have changed. Climate has warmed because there's all this stuff, this inertia in the pipeline. So kind of getting ourselves prepared for the change, but also going, hey, by this time, if we really work hard, we'll have a different planet, but we'll be on a sustainable future. And it's kind of along the lines of what Deb Morrison's put together with the book story time, all that we can save. Like, we know that there's stuff at risk. We know the stuff is going, extinct, but we work hard now and we have a much better opportunity for the future than if we just sort of sit on our laurels and go, like Frank said, it's over, not going to happen. So yeah, so really neat opportunities for that integration, I guess.
Hey, Amy, I just saw, given where we are in time, but I just saw something I don't know anything about. Do you want to name what you just put in the chat?
It's just, I think the genre that you're talking about, Eric, is called solar punk. I mean, I have some like collections from it, and it's exactly that. It's like, what would happen if we did this, right? So I kind of don't even know where to start on it. I went down a sci-fi rabbit hole a long time ago, but if this group has other suggestions about that, then let me know.
I'm tired of dystopian future. I avoid it at all extent. I do not want to see a failed future. I want to see what a successful future looks like and get excited about it through all forms of media. So that's my personal editorial. We are close to the end. Is there anything else that anybody wants to put forth in this space today before we just see if there's any last announcements? Just trying to respect your time.
Just really quickly, National Endowment for the Humanities has a lot of grant opportunities right now. It might be worth that include curriculum. It might be a really good space for this. So just you should check it out. I put the
Thank you.
link. There's some fast approaching deadlines.
And just to help you, Jen Kretzer is a very savvy grant guru. There are others in this group that are. Part of what the Clean Network is just people who are in the same space but have different skills. And and we tend to be collaborative and generative in with our time when possible. So that's a real offer. So hopefully that's why we do this. That's why we keep doing this. Just to remember, you know, why this time is precious and important. So do you feel like you've gotten what you're looking for today?
More than we expected. It has been the greatest conversation that we have had so far in our effort of reaching out to experts to help us inform our work. So we're really, really thankful to
Wonderful.
all of you for taking your time and for sharing your thoughts and expertise with us. Thank you so much.